What up, Screen Fiends? I'm GB, and you're tuned in to Headz TV, where we like to discuss all the wonderful things appearing on your movie and your TV screens. In this episode, we're going to have another Preacher discussion, where I'm going to do my best to explain the character of Herr Starr. Alright, so in my attempt to explain to you who Herr Starr is and what motivates him, a little bit of his backstory, I'm also going to do my best to not spoil anything that has a huge bearing on the story, or of course anything that hasn't happened yet in his timeline from the books. I'm going to do it much like the way I did the Saint of Killers video, but that was two parts. This one will probably all fit into one part, because I'll tell you the truth, even in the books, there isn't tons of backstory for Herr Starr. A lot of the stuff we learn about him, we learn through the events that are actually happening. So this one was a little bit shorter to put together. All right, let's just get into it. So he doesn't really have any powers or anything like that. He does have an unusual devotion when he gets something in his brain. He really devotes himself to it way more than the average person does. That's not a superpower, but it is a really strong character trait. He is an expert marksman, as well as a pretty adept fighter. He's in the books, he doesn't really seem to be that much of a hand-to-hand combat guy, but in the show, they seem to be going slightly different routes. So that'll probably come up a couple times in this where I tell you I think they're going somewhere different with the show. So I think he'll be a little more adept at fighting in the show than he was in the books. But he's still a military man. He's still skilled on, pretty much various forms of combat. But his brain really is his biggest weapon, okay? That and his marksmanship. So we'll say that those are his abilities, right? All right, so to get started, all right, he's a German dude, I believe West Germany. And, he was raised in West Germany. And as a child is when he got that scar on his face. If you look at the scar, like you really look at it, it looks like a star almost. Like it's, like a star that you do with all straight lines. And the reason why he has that scar is he was attacked by a bunch of kids. I believe they were slightly older than him. I think he was probably around like 10-ish. And the kids were probably around, like 15, 14-ish, something like that. They might have even been closer in age. And they attacked him. They beat him pretty severely. They damaged his trachea, which is why he has a gruffer voice. And I'm not sure if it's explained entirely in the book, but he loses his hair as a result of this attack also. I don't know if it's the fear that they strike in him or whatever. I'm really drawing a blank right now, and I read up on this right before the video too. That's pretty bad. Of course, I didn't write everything down. Alright, so they give him that scar because his last name is Starr. Now, we never, in the book anyway, we never learn his first name. He's just always referred to as Herr Starr, and I believe Herr is like a military thing, like a title or whatever. I'm sure somebody will correct me in the comments. Feel free. So they give him that scar that's shaped like a star because that's his name, is Starr. Now, because of this really, really shapes and molds who he becomes later on in life. So what happens at this point is he basically hunts down the kids one by one and kills them. And each death looks like an accident. They all look like accidental deaths. I think there was like 5 or 6 kids, and he kills them all. And he does it in such a smart, methodical way. You kind of get to see how he became the way that he is, as far as the way he approaches combat or the way he approaches, certain situations. Excuse me. Now, this childhood shaped, his attitude. It shaped his way of thinking, for years to come. So this is a guy who, he experiences no joy. Very little joy. Most of the joy that he experiences comes from pain and or gratifying his devotion to ending chaos. I'll get to that in a second. So he doesn't really experience joy, not even from sex, like that's not even an enjoyable experience for him until a little bit later in life when he becomes a sadist and he kind of gets his sexual gratification through humiliating others and inflicting pain on others. And that kind of evolves even further down the line, which I'll get to a little bit later also. So, no friends. He's full of hate. This is just a guy that, a sociopath, a loner, all by himself, always trying to feed his hunger, whatever it is at that moment, feed his hatred, whatever it is at that moment. So now he grows up with a distaste for chaos. I always led this to be, from what happened with the kids. It was a chaotic moment. It was chaos on the streets. There's something else that happened that I'm going to get to in a minute that's also like a very chaotic moment in his history. So he has a huge distaste for chaos, and he's really obsessed with like law and order and things going a certain way, people getting their just due. He has a certain sense of justice, even if it's a twisted sense, even if it's way different from maybe your or my sense of justice. He has a huge sense of justice. So if you look at a guy like this who doesn't like chaos, he's obsessed with law and order, and his goals aren't completely evil. This is somebody that, I know he doesn't seem like it right now, but if on the show they display this depth of character, he's going to come across as not really the villain at all times. Much like with the cowboy, how at first we are led to sympathize with him all throughout season 1. Even though he's a scary character, even still, we sympathize with him. And that when they bring it to us in season 2, we're kind of rooting for him in a way. We don't want him to kill Jesse, or even worse, Cassidy or Tulip. But we're in a way kind of rooting for the cowboy because we got a chance. They humanized him, and that's something that's great about Preacher is as a whole, the story, it has so much of just human nature, and nobody's really all bad or all good. Most people are gray, just like they are in real life. Some people just make bad choices or whatever it is, right? Or they just see things through a different lens than we do. Now, that doesn't make someone right, but it makes them at least relatable or easier to understand or empathize with. All right, I'm sorry. Let me stop rambling. I'll move this along. All right, so now I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to the Grail for a second. So his beliefs of chaos and law and order and all that, they're similar to the goals of the Grail. They just put God before all of that. So it's God's dominance over humanity. It's God's order over chaos. It's it's God's law and order, And when he finally meets the Grail after something else happens in his life, these ideas resonate with him. I'll get back to that in 1 second. So after, that messed up childhood or whatever, and they don't really tell you much about what happens between him getting scarred and all of that up until, he was in the military. But he's in the West German army. He's an anti-terror specialist, and they go in to stop these terrorists from hijacking a plane. They're successful, but in the midst of the gunfire, and I believe it was Herr Starr's gunfire, but it might have been the terrorists. Once again, foggy. A 6-year-old girl, 7-year-old girl gets like her head blown off or whatever, and he looks at it and he's on that. This is chaos. This needs to end. The world needs to be a different place. So Herr Starr's philosophy is to make the world a safer place, to make it a better place. That's his goal. That's what he's trying to achieve. And when he meets the Grail, they come to him with the same idea. The only difference is they're putting religion behind it where he's not. But they kind of flip them to their beliefs in a way. Remember, once we are shaped into what we are, we're always what we are deep inside, right? Even if we try and be something else. So even when you try to be a religious person, if there's parts in you that enjoy being bad, I'm not saying that anyone is inherently bad or not, but those feelings will always come back. It's just like a drug addict will always get the feelings, even when they're clean, of doing this or that. You know what I mean? It's just the human brain, the condition, right? So just because he adopts the Grail's philosophies doesn't mean he 100% agrees with them, but he sees it as a means to an end. So he basically thinks that the Grail's way about doing things may be better than his way of war and killing for justice, that type of thing, because the Grail presents themselves as a religious entity to him. I'm going to do a whole video probably on just the Grail, so I'm not going to get too much into them, but you get the gist of what they are. They're a secret, super secret organization, and they have very huge religious tones to them. All right, so then after this event, he basically gets recruited by the Grail, and it's a very different recruitment. Not even slightly. I'm pretty sure in the books we never get to see any training or that he's going up against other people that are also qualified for the position, like we saw in the show, which I loved in the show. And even though that's not ripped from the source material, it gives you a really good sense of who Herr Starr is, just as a general person, where he's kind of depraved, where you see how in the show when he whips his junk out on the wrestling mat and all that. He has no joy in regular sex or regular things. So this is nothing for him. He probably actually got a kick out of the depravity of it and the humiliation that the other guy, that he was wrestling against, felt, the humiliation there. So they did a great job of that, but it's a little different here. Here, it's basically they looked at his past, who he was as a person, who he was as a soldier, and they decided that they were going to give him a mission to see if he was cut out to be a member of the Grail. Now, his mission in the book is very similar to how he tries to take out Jesse with Bob. Was it Bob? Brad. Sorry, with Brad, by basically blowing up a whole building just to kill one person. And that's his mission, is to kill this one refugee in a mental hospital. And instead of just going after that one guy, he blows up the whole mental hospital, killing everybody inside. And when he's asked what the reason behind this was, there was much easier ways to do it, whatever. He basically says, well, this will never be traced back to us. It'll never be traced back to the Grail. It could have been an enemy of any one of the hundreds of people that were inside the mental hospital. It could have been a random act of terror. It could have been so many things. If I went in there and killed that one person, they're investigating one death. But now, blowing up the whole mental hospital, they are investigating hundreds of deaths. And that's really quite genius if you think about it. Now, they're changing up a lot of stuff for the show. That's not why he was going to do Jesse that way. He was doing it because his other methods failed. But it's still the same idea that I don't care about everybody else in that building. I want to kill this one guy. I'm going to kill this one guy. So yeah. Everything so far that they've shown on the show has been slightly different, except for who he is as a core character. It seems like all of that is going to be the same. The way he got his promotion and rose to power by throwing that dude out the window, that's not the way it went down in the books. In the books, he gradually went up the ranks and earned different ranks, right? But I believe that they're going to keep the idea of it the same. So, we're going to get to a point where he's going to get an even higher position than he is now, right? So in the books, his first position is basically to maintain order, to kill the people that are disrupting what the Grail is trying to do, which looks like he's in a similar position now, because instead of just killing people because of that, he's killing people that may question the beliefs in Jesus or the Messiah or the coming of Christ. So it's very similar into his job now. Now he's going to move up. I'm going to spoil a little tiny bit. He's going to move up another rank to be like the head executioner, where he's going to be Maybe he's even in that position now, where he's the guy who decides who dies and all that. Yeah, I think he's actually in the executioner position now. So basically, the higher he gets in the Grail, the more secrets he's going to learn. And then him and the Grail are maybe not going to see so eye to eye. And that's where I'm going to leave it as far as his story goes, because obviously we're getting into the territory that they're going to go in the show. But I hope that maybe gives you a better idea of who he is. He's a sadist. Oh, and then, I'm sorry, I skipped one thing. And then, when he hires the prostitutes, and those guys come up and they basically give it to him, that's the next evolution in his depravity. Before that moment, it was all about the other person. So he needed to humiliate the other person. He needed to hurt the other person, right? He was a sadist in order to get off. That's how he got his kicks. But then after this happens and he's violated the way he's violated, it evolves to where now he needs to be hurt to get off, as well as humiliating and hurting others. So he's full on S&M now at this point. And that happens very similarly in the books. There are differences here and there, but it's still Featherstone and the black dude, I forgot his name, Russell, that get him the wrong type of prostitute and all that. That's all from the book, that they nailed that pretty much. But it's only one guy instead of three. But I guess to make it more believable with how badass they were making him on the show, they had to make it three guys, But that was really good stuff. I like the changes. Not only does it keep me guessing and on my toes, even though I know the source material, the changes, sometimes are a little bit more realistic, or they just work better in the confounds of a television show. But here's something I will say, without spoiling it. Herr Starr is a really interesting character. What I've told you is only stuff that's basically mentioned in the books. I haven't really told you any of the stuff, the crazy stuff we're going to see, we're going to learn, and that's going to happen to, with, and revolving around Herr Starr as we go on throughout the show. He is a character that should be on the show for quite a bit, pretty much to the ending, right? And he only gets more interesting. And I don't want to say too much, but Preacher, the book, as well as the show, has a strange way of presenting us comedy. And Eugene is a strange way of presenting comedy to us, but it works. Cassidy is a little bit less strange, right? But Herr Starr is another one of those strange comical characters that you're going to look at and go, is it okay for me to laugh? Should I be laughing right now? So buckle up, because you're in for a ride with this character. I hope I was able to add some insight into who Herr Starr is, what motivates him, what drives him, and how he became what he is. So definitely drop some comments down below. Let me know what you thought about this video. Let me know if you understand Herr Starr maybe a little bit better now that you've learned a little bit. And just drop anything Preacher related down in the comments. I love to talk about this stuff. I haven't been too good with videos and comments lately. I just started a new job. I apologize for that, but I'm trying to work back into a good schedule. So, yep, thank you so much for watching. That's it for this one. You have a fantastic day, and I will see you next time.